Anytime you hear somebody say that the US dollar is doomed or that BRICS nations are going to replace the US dollar with their own currency, I want you to send them this video. I want you to send them this video to tell them how wrong they are, but also so they protect themselves from losing a ton of money, because the assumption that the US dollar is going to disappear or that it's going to wither away into nothingness is a very dangerous assumption that many people have, and it's going to lead to a lot of wealth being completely lost. And I'm going to share some facts with you to prove to you how important the US dollar is, but also to show you how weak other currencies are. Then I'm going to tell you about international business and how important that is, or how important the US dollar is in international business. And then I'm going to tell you about how currencies work on the ground in reality. And I'm also going to tell you about the future of the US dollar over the next couple of years and what you should be aware of. So first of all, some facts. 58% of all foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars. So when a country chooses to hold their wealth in a currency, 58% of the time they choose the US dollar. The second currency in line is the euro at 20%. There's no currency that comes even close to the US dollar. And below the euro, there's a bunch of other currencies under 5%. The US dollar is so dominant here, it's not even funny. When it comes to foreign exchange transactions internationally, 88% of the time the US dollar is involved. It's almost as if the US dollar is involved in every single transaction globally. It is so dominant. Now let's talk about the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. If you had held your wealth in any of these countries' currencies over the past decade, you would have been annihilated. I'm going to tell you right now, Brazil has lost 57% of its purchasing value compared to the US dollar over the past decade. Russia, 50% has been lost. India, 26% has been lost. China, 15% has been lost. And South Africa, 37% has been lost. And that's just the BRICS nations. Go look at some other nations who have had hyperinflation with their currency. The US dollar has outperformed nearly every single currency globally for the past 100 years. So if you had held your wealth in any other currency other than the US dollar, you would have lost a lot of your wealth. That trend line that I just talked about, all those BRICS nations losing all of that value, is likely to continue because in late 2024, almost all of those currencies are near all-time lows compared to the US dollar, meaning highly likely that those currencies are going to continue to fall and they're going to continue to lose value compared to the US dollar. All right, let's talk about international business. I've been doing international business for about 2 decades. I've done real estate, venture capital, private equity across Asia, Latin America, Europe, and of course in the US. And I'll tell you what, when you are making a deal in a different country that's totally unrelated to the US, oftentimes the deal is actually settled in US dollars. For example, if you're doing real estate in a different country, you have to put money into escrow. When you put money into escrow, it gets locked up for a certain amount of time. In business deals, when you're doing a business transaction, the time frame can be even longer than real estate. So if you're tying up capital for a certain amount of time, most people choose the US dollar because it's the least volatile. Because if you're going to lock up money for an extended amount of time, you don't want it to be in a currency that's going to lose value over that time. That's why the US dollar is often chosen in international business, even if the US isn't involved in the transaction. They choose the US dollar because it has low volatility and super high liquidity. All right, let's talk about on-the-ground transactions with people who are buying and selling things every day. Generally speaking, around the world, most people trust the US dollar. Remember, most people are not investors. They're not currency nerds. They're not people looking into financial, monetary policy. They're people that want to maintain the wealth that they are working for. So when they're selling food on the street or selling clothes or whatever, they want to transact in a currency that they trust. And generally speaking, globally, most people trust the US dollar. I'm not saying the US dollar is perfect. I'm just saying that the emotions of most people tend to lean towards trusting the US dollar. And this is true if you take US dollars and go to a different country. Many times other countries will accept those US dollars. In fact, many other countries have adopted the US dollar as their official currency, like Ecuador, Panama, El Salvador, and Venezuela has basically been dollarized now because it is the most liquid and most trustworthy currency, even though Venezuela, the leadership there, hates the US dollar. So let's look at what's going to happen with the US dollar going forward. You may think, oh my gosh, the US dollar is going to be strong forever. Well, in fact, the US actually wants the dollar to weaken. In fact, I think Donald Trump will do all he can to weaken the US dollar over the next couple of years because It's very difficult to do trade when you have a strong currency, because if you're selling goods into the international market and your currency is very strong, that means other currencies that are weak are gonna have a tough time purchasing your goods. So the US is probably going to try to weaken the US dollar as much as possible into the coming years, which means that many other currencies are gonna get wrecked. They're gonna get weakened even more than they have over the past decade as the US intentionally tries to weaken the strength of the US dollar so they are competitive in the US markets. All right, that's a quick explanation of why the US dollar is not going anywhere. If you think the US dollar is going to disappear, or you think a BRICS nation is going to disrupt the US dollar, or if you think the BRICS nations together are going to disrupt the US dollar, put your money where your mouth is. Show me your trade, show me your investment, show me how you are playing on the fall of the US dollar. It's not gonna happen, but if it is gonna happen, show me how you're doing it. All right, guys, share this video with anybody who thinks the US dollar is disappearing. And by the way, I'm not saying the US dollar is perfect. I'm saying that the US dollar is better than any other currency. It's the healthiest horse in the glue factory, as I like to say. If you really want to hold your wealth, go buy gold, silver, Bitcoin. Hold your wealth in something that's not going to be inflated away through a fiat currency that is mismanaged by a government that has insane monetary policy. But if you are going to hold a fiat currency, might as well be the US dollar. All right, see you guys.